Welcome back to another episode of Sailing into the Mystic. As you may have seen from our last episode, we have taken the Mystic out of the water and are working on needed maintenance issues that we have known about since we bought the boat a year and a half prior. After working a long weekend on all the through hulls, we now needed to focus on a few other projects. In this episode, we followed 2 projects, but in actuality, we were bouncing around among several projects, making only incremental progress with everything each day we were on the hard. A little after 5:30, and I'm driving back over to the boatyard. It's after work on Tuesday. Had a long day of work, and I wanted to get over there a little earlier, but I had to finish up an assignment. And haven't eaten anything all day, so I just gobbled up a pizza, which I don't even eat anymore. And I've noticed we've been eating nothing but fast food over the past 5 days. And now I'm, driving the hour to get over to Oceanside that it takes from home. And I don't know even if I'll be of use, but Tim's going to try and take the keel off the boat. And I would imagine he'll need an extra pair of hands at least to get it off. That thing looks massive to me. I hope it's not really heavy. But my God, this is hard to do while we're working. I wish we can just take a month off and finish all this stuff. But we're still trying to do this. Because the boatyard's going to fix the keel, I don't think we're going to get charged right now for the dry dock fees, because we're just waiting on them to fix the keel. But I don't know. We'll see. It feels like we're, racing against the clock to try and get things done.
We're trying to remove the rudder to fix the rudder to refiberglass it. And so I've got to drop the rudder. So there's a bolt that went through here. It's coming out. There's a little Allen wrench. There's a collar that's going to come out. The quadrant has to come out. And then also the seal down there. And also the sensor for the rudder position sensor. It's gonna come up. I can't lift the thing down without a bunch of guys or a crane.
Anything else has to be unbolted outside still?
Yeah, this is totally done inside here.
But outside,
it's ready to come down. There's 4 bolts outside, and they're kind of like under paint and stuff like that, so we gotta kind of scrape through, dig at them, find them.
And true to Tim's habits, he figured out a way for us to drop the rudder without the help of the boatyard after all. Jorge, the fiberglass expert in the boatyard, was available to start working on the rudder the very next day, so this put us in a good position to get that project going. The next thing to tackle before heading home was to finish installing the last of the 7 new through hulls. With this complete, we felt like we were leaving ourselves in a good place to continue the work the following weekend. But then, the unthinkable occurred. While playing a teachers versus students volleyball game during lunchtime, Tim sustained a pretty severe injury. Just when the end of lunch bell rang, a student served the ball in between Tim and another teacher, and Tim did not want to lose the game. In the process of diving for the ball, his hamstring ripped completely off the bone. And apparently there is nothing to be done about it except rest and occupational therapy. Later, I found him alone in a hospital bed in the hallway of a very busy hospital, where he was waiting for all the test results. The conclusion? Go home and stay home for a long recovery period. Needless to say, we could not go to the boatyard that weekend and still for another 3 days after that. Finally, Tim at least was able to hobble around, and so we made a trip to the boatyard so that we could return some tools we borrowed, check on Jorge's fiberglass work, and make sure we weren't being charged for any storage fees, which was our biggest fear while Tim was in recovery.
I gotta sand this hole bottom paint thing, you know, and laminate this part, and after that, when it's all sand down and good, give some barrier coat. I put like 2, 3, 4 coats of barrier coat, you know, to prevent the humidity.
Yeah, yeah.
But the funny part is your blisters and everything you have, it came from in out.
Oh.
And that makes sense? Because of you was so much wet inside, so much humidity, and in the way, you know, it's porous glass.
Yeah.
Jorge was informing us as to why it was taking extra long for him to do the repairs on the rudder. We knew that as long as the boatyard was working on our boat, we wouldn't have to pay for storage fees, so little did he know, we were relieved that he was needing to take more time on the project. Meanwhile, I went upstairs to remind us of where we left off and what our very next steps needed to be once Tim was feeling good enough to start working again. We were very worried about Tim having to climb these stairs to get into the boat when we returned next. Our poor boat. This is how disastrous it looks. All the unfinished work, all the tools, all the parts. Still have our bed taken apart. Haven't finished the shaft seal. I don't know what we're gonna do. Okay, we're back at the boat. It is exactly a week since Tim's injury and 3.5 weeks since my injury. And Tim has just started walking. He's actually hobbling. He can transport himself from one place to another, but it's very slow and he has to be very careful with his stepping. So we're gonna try and get him into the boat. I know I'm feeling better now going up and down the stairs. I was pretty tired last weekend we were here, and it was hurting my ankle. You know, I did a couple of flights, and then after that I was like, I gotta take it easy. But this weekend I think that I should be able to run up and down the stairs and get whatever Tim needs. If I can get his butt up here, then we can get started. That is the plan. We will check back. I got some on ice. Well, you made it in the boat.
Finally. 25 minutes later.
Just started into one project and then had to backtrack out of it. Lost a lot of time there. So now we're putting that project aside because there's problems with that, and we're moving into a different one. Right now you're just trying to put a thermal valve on.
Yep.
We decided to bite the bullet instead of putting these plastic elbows back in. Go ahead and replace everything with something much sturdier. So $54 each.
This has got a special fitting on it, special deal, so
that one we won't change.
yeah, but it's all right because I mean there's a ball valve there, so if this happens to fail, just like any of those hoses happen to fail, we'd shut the ball valve.
Got one of these label makers and I love this thing. Just made my first official label for the boat. You just connected the tube. But apparently I need to keep this away from my husband.
Alright, so we're going to install this really nice transducer, which is actually a triducer from Airmar. And so what it does is it does your speed for you, water temperature, and depth finder all in one. So it's really nice. And this will integrate with my Vulcan system, and it'll just go right into the display on that, and I'll just plug it straight into the NEMA 2000 line, and it will put all the information exactly where I want it to be. So we're doing that one along with the Ford scans.
Okay.
So we're changing around transducers, and we had two right next to each other over here. One was just a speed, and the other one was just a depth.
Right. For the old ones.
Right, the old ones. So we're changing that configuration. We're putting the new fancy Ford scan,
Yeah.
and then I want to put the triducer that will have depth, speed, and water temp.
Yeah.
But we can't put them that close together. That's why we can't use those same holes. I gotta,
That's why you were gonna fiberglass those full, close them up, and then drill one new hole.
Yeah, for the Ford scans, so it'll be straight up and down
area.
and not at an angle.
Right.
And I did talk to him about just filling both of those two holes up there, because one's got to get re-drilled in the right angle anyway. He knew exactly what I was talking about. It was like why I wanted those filled, and he's like, "Oh yeah, because if you don't do it, you're going to have one that's drilled out this way, and you need to have the hole drilled this way. So it'll be the same hole. It'll be like all wallered out. They call it. So I have a gap right here and a gap over here. But if you just fill it and then re-drill it, it won't have any gaps. We're going to go ahead and put this right about there.
What? Got all the way through?
No, shit.
What?
Nothing.
Hey!
So yeah, now we're gonna go and put this piece on it and come up to the outside in. All right, let's go outside. Shit. This is it right here.
No. Look at the squirrel.
A squirrel?
Nice.
We're going to drill a hole in this one right now.
We successfully installed the first transducer without any issues, so now we are moving on to the more complicated forward scan. Though both transducers were being installed in two bilges right next to each other, we made sure to install them more than 2 feet away from each other.
So come here, let me show you what Jorge did for me. So Jorge beautifully glassed and cut and filled these holes that we had the other transducers in, which we're not using. We're going to use one transducer right here.
Well, install our own new one.
Which has to go in at an angle. That's why we covered the other one up, because it came out straight this way. So we want this one to come in this way. So,
Which is really straight up and down, right?
yeah. So anyway, Jorge marked exactly where the old holes were. So if we wanted to, we could get as close as we can to that other hole, which I do. And then that'll also tell me I'm clear from everything up inside here. I'm not too close to a wall or here or in this side. So that's really why I want to do it. So he drew a line straight across from, he labeled it 1 to 1. So that was a straight line across there. I just go about in the middle of it. And then 2 be straight up through here to here. So right where they intersect would be the center of that through hole that he filled for us. So I could go pretty much right there. Now the other thing I want to do is check the angle on here. So our transducer will work in a range of angles. It doesn't have to be perfectly at 0 degrees, straight up and down. It can work up to, I think this one was 22 degrees. So anyway, I just took off 10 degrees off of this, and that's what this is. So this isn't perfect level, but it's within the range. that we can do. So
Yeah, it looks good.
yeah, looks real nice. I actually have that angle finder that I can put on this inside there, the digital one, and it'll tell me what angle that's at, and then that'll be the angle I want to use the drill to go. So it won't be perfectly straight up and down. It'll be
how do you
at
know?
this angle.
How do you know you're going to be at that angle on the drill?
Calibrated arm experience. Can't see it.
.5.
Okay, that's great. That's well within the. If this is 90 degrees straight up and down, we need to go 5.5 off of 90 degrees. So
4.5. I know it's perfect. We placed the nut around the small hole that was just drilled to make sure it would be positioned far enough away from the walls of the bilge. See how it matches up. Not bad. Tim's naturally calibrated arm drilled it within 1 degree.
So what I need now is the sensor. I want to put the sensor in here and bolt it down to make sure it fits in here properly. Just cleaning all these little burrs, little sharp edges and leftover material. Make sure it has a good flush. That's about it. I mean, it just goes pretty snug and it just stops. So that's how far down we have to have.
It turns out that the through hull was not long enough, so we were either going to have to shave down the plastic base of the sensor or find a longer through hull to make it all fit. If you ever had to clean up 4200 or 5200 goop, as I call it, you know why this task is a major pain in the butt. I was supposed to clean all that off.
You gotta shave this thinner. Exactly that angle. Just shave it down thinner. We got a lot of fucking cleaning here. Might have to buy a whole nother piece.
I don't think we have enough. This is it. We're starting all over again, and that's about as good as they're gonna get. And the hole is cleaned out almost. We'll do more there. Now that the second transducer is finally installed, we needed to run the wires for both transducers through the bilges underneath the floorboard all the way back to the navigation station. We taped the ends of the two cables coming from the transducers to a metal wire and then poked the metal wire through the openings from one bilge to another.
All right. Keep going. It's just organizing these wires and making it look a little better and easier to diagnose problems if they come up. And also installing the new transducer. It's got to go into this backbone of all these other connectors here. They all connect together and then go from there into the B&G Vulcan chart plotter. So we need one more. See, they have a little T like this. They all fit in together. And so we need one more T to put onto the end. And then that will accept the last one. Cleaned up all these wires. Cleaned up all this from here. backbone, tucked up all the extra wire that was there, and also mounted this, which has got to have that arrow pointing forward. That's our wind sensor, wind direction and everything.
So we got a hole drilled.
It was a very complex hole. I mean, this had to be just right. So once we cut the fairing at 10 degrees, we had to cut the hole at 10 degrees. So that was kind of nerve-wracking, making sure we get that done. But it turned out great. I mean, the hole was cut just right on. Everything was great. We had to get the whole thing under 10 degrees of angle. I mean, so we didn't have to have it perfectly straight. It just had to be under 10 degrees. So we got it to 6. So that's great.
Yeah. And tried to get the transducer in there. Had everything installed, all gooped up with that 4200, and then the through hole wasn't long enough. So that was not fun. And then you did hopefully fix the leak in the mast.
Yeah.
Put some 4200 around the base of it on top.
Your dad would be like, oh, let's replace that wood, which he's right. I mean, he would be right if he did say that.
Well, with the wood underneath?
No, up on top. There's like two, it's like a circle, this shape of the mast. But they just kind of two pieces that go and butt up against it.
Yeah.
So that should come off, make 2 new pieces, and the other 2 pieces on the bottom should be redone too. But, just cleaning it, sealing it for now will be great. And that's something that we don't have to have out of the water to do.
That sun is so pretty. It's been raining this last week, and this is our day we have as a break from the rain. And everything's so crystal clear and clean. We should be sailing today.
Be nice.
But it's gonna rain all this next week. So, we don't have much left to do, but our rudder can't get done, and nor can the rest of the fiberglass on the hull. We're gonna fix a bunch of bubbles.
Yeah.
All right, folks, if you made it this far, perhaps you would consider subscribing if you haven't already. Our goal right now is 500 subs, but we would only want you subscribing if you plan on returning to us to follow our story, boat projects, and upcoming adventures. We are now releasing short videos every Wednesday and our regular episodes every Sunday morning. If you don't plan on returning, but you happen to like any portion of our video, would you please at least consider just giving the video a thumbs up? Subscribing and adding a thumbs up does not cost anything to the viewer, but definitely gives the content provider a bump up in the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching.